What if I told you that hidden within the pages of the Bible lies one of humanity's oldest astronomical secrets, a cosmic code that's been staring us in the face for thousands of years? Tonight, we're diving deep into a mystery that connects ancient Persian stargazers, Chinese astronomers, and biblical prophets in ways that will absolutely blow your mind. The question we're going to answer is this: did the ancient biblical writers possess advanced astronomical knowledge that modern science is only now beginning to understand? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth about how the stars themselves may have been designed to tell an ancient story, one that bridges the gap between heaven and earth in ways you never imagined. Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history, and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Every star chart is packed with figures, men, women, animals, mythical beasts. These constellations represent something far more profound than most people realize. While everyone assumes these patterns came from Greek and Roman mythology, the evidence tells a radically different story. When researchers examined astronomical records of ancient civilizations, Chinese, Chaldeans, Egyptians, they discovered something mind-blowing. These separate cultures, scattered across continents with no contact, all recognized the exact same celestial signs. Identical configurations, matching names, sequential ordering. The answer is revolutionary: they were all copying from something much older. This universal agreement points to stellar patterns fixed according to an ancient religious system that predates recorded history. Here's the fascinating part: many star arrangements don't naturally suggest they're assigned figures. Scorpio works, its heart marked by red Antares, stars forming a curved tail. Taurus makes sense with visible horns and bright Aldebaran marking the bull's eye. But most constellations look nothing like their names suggest. This tells us whoever designed this system wanted stars to conform to specific representations, regardless of natural appearance. These star pictures exist within the zodiacal circle, an imaginary band wrapping around the sky through which our solar system travels. The sun's path, called the ecliptic, forms a perfect circle when viewed from the North Star. Ancient astronomers identified 4 critical points: vernal equinox, autumnal equinox, summer solstice, and winter solstice. These cosmic cardinal directions form the foundation of the entire celestial system. Solstice comes from Latin meaning stand still, because the sun appears to pause at these moments. Here's where our story enters ancient mystery territory. Early Persian and Chinese writings describe 4 magnificent guardian stars watching over all others from the cardinal directions. These brilliant sentinels stood at the most important celestial intersections. When modern astronomers looked for these guardian stars at today's cardinal points, they found nothing. No bright stars anywhere near these positions. This suggested either ancient records were wrong, or these stars had dimmed over millennia. Then someone had a brilliant idea. What if we're looking in the wrong place? Earth wobbles on its axis like a spinning top, causing the precession of the equinoxes. Over thousands of years, cardinal points slowly drift westward through the star field. When researchers calculated where those points would have been 5,000 years ago, they made a stunning discovery. There they were, 4 blazing stars positioned exactly where ancient texts said: Aldebaran, Antares, Regulus, and Fomalhaut, located in Taurus the bull, Scorpio the eagle, Leo the lion, and Aquarius the water-bearer. Here's where our cosmic detective story intersects with biblical prophecy in the most extraordinary way. The prophet Ezekiel, writing 2,500 years ago, recorded a vision describing exactly these 4 celestial guardians. In Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 10, "As for the likeness of their faces, the cherubims, they had the face of a man, and they 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, they 4 had also the face of an eagle." A man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, corresponding perfectly to Aquarius the water-bearer, Leo the lion, Taurus the bull, and Scorpio the eagle. The connection becomes even more explicit in Revelation chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. And round about the throne, 4 living creatures full of eyes before and behind. And the first creature was like a lion, and the second creature like a calf, and the third creature had the face of a man, and the fourth creature was like a flying eagle. These biblical writers were describing the same cosmic arrangement that Persian and Chinese astronomers documented, the zodiac, when those 4 guardian stars stood watch at heaven's cardinal points. Ezekiel provides astronomical detail that's mind-blowing when you understand celestial mechanics. In chapter 1, verses 18 and 19. As for their rims, they were high and dreadful, and they 4 had their rims full of eyes round about. And when the living creatures went, the wheels went beside them, and when the living creatures were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up. And chapter 10, verse 12. And their whole body, and their backs, and their hands, and their wings, and the wheels, were full of eyes round about, even the wheels that they 4 had. Ezekiel describes wheels within wheels, covered with eyes, moving in perfect coordination. Ancient peoples described stars as eyes, watching from heaven, and the zodiacal circle literally moves like a great wheel through the sky. These same 4 creatures served as emblems of Israel's 4 great tribes: Judah, lion; Ephraim, ox; Reuben, man; and Dan, eagle. When Israelites camped in the wilderness, they arranged in a perfect square with these tribal banners marking cardinal directions, a terrestrial mirror of the celestial arrangement. The evidence for ancient astronomical knowledge is staggering. Greek poet Hesiod, writing around 800 BC, noted that Arcturus rose at sunset 50 days after winter solstice, February 19th in his calendar. Today, that star rises at sunset on March 30th in Greece. Using stellar precession rates, astronomers calculate Hesiod made his observations exactly 2,800 years ago, confirming both ancient astronomical records and our understanding of celestial mechanics. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect is what this suggests about the origin of human knowledge. These astronomical truths weren't developed gradually over centuries. They appear fully formed in the earliest historical records, suggesting inheritance from an even more ancient source. The zodiacal system, with precise mathematical divisions, sophisticated understanding of precession, and integration with complex prophetic literature, represents astronomical knowledge that seems almost impossible for primitive cultures to have developed independently. Yet there it is, embedded in Chinese legends, Persian texts, Egyptian charts, and biblical prophecy, a unified cosmic narrative spanning continents and millennia, pointing back to some primordial source of astronomical wisdom. So our answer to the opening question, did biblical writers possess advanced astronomical knowledge, is a resounding yes. More than that, they were guardians of ancient cosmic wisdom connecting heaven and earth in ways modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The next time you look up at the night sky, remember, you're not seeing random stars. You're witnessing the same cosmic theater that inspired ancient prophets, guided Persian astronomers, and preserved the greatest astronomical mystery in human history. The heavens are still declaring the glory, we're just finally learning how to listen. What if the night sky isn't just a random scattering of stars, but an ancient book written by God Himself, a cosmic story of redemption that predates the Bible by thousands of years? Tonight, we're diving into one of history's most stunning mysteries, evidence that the zodiac and constellations weren't invented by ancient mythology at all, but were actually designed by the Creator as the original gospel message for all humanity. Stay with us as we uncover how patriarchs like Adam, Seth, and Enoch may have charted the heavens under divine inspiration, and why the Bible itself confirms that the stars were meant to tell us something far more profound than tomorrow's horoscope. The story begins where all stories begin, at creation itself. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 14, God makes a declaration that most people breeze right past, and God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days, and years." Notice that word, signs. Not just lights, not just decorations, signs. A sign, by definition, is something deliberately chosen to represent something else entirely. God wasn't just hanging lanterns in the sky for illumination. He was encoding a message, crafting celestial symbols that would speak truths beyond what the naked eye could naturally deduce. The heavens, it seems, were always meant to be a divine textbook. But here's where things get fascinating. If we travel back to what many scholars believe is the oldest book in the Bible, the Book of Job, we find that this cosmic wisdom wasn't some recent revelation. Job's story unfolds in an era so ancient that it contains absolutely no reference to Israelite history, no mention of Moses or the law. The prophet Ezekiel brackets Job with Noah and Daniel, while James in the New Testament reminds believers, "Ye have heard of the patience of Job." Mathematicians who've analyzed the astronomical references scattered throughout Job's 42 chapters have calculated that this patriarch lived around 2150 BC, over 1,000 years before Homer penned his epics, and 15 centuries before Thales became Greece's first philosopher. Yet even in Job's time, the heavens were already systematically organized. The Zodiac existed, the constellations had names, the stars had been charted, their patterns drawn and recorded. This wasn't primitive stargazing. This was sophisticated astronomical knowledge passed down through generations. God himself challenges Job with a rhetorical question that reveals just how established this celestial system was. Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth, the constellations of the Zodiac, in his season? Obviously, Job couldn't control the stars' movements. No human could. The constellations appeared in their appointed times, following divine orchestration. Job also described specific star formations with an intimacy that suggests widespread familiarity. He writes, "By his spirit he hath garnished, made bright or beautiful, the heavens, his hand hath formed the crooked, or fleeing, serpent," a clear reference to the constellation Draco, the dragon. He mentions Arcturus and Orion, the Pleiades, and even Leviathan, the sea monster known today as Cetus. The way Job writes suggests that educated people of his era didn't need these explained, they already knew them. And Job isn't alone in testifying to the divine origins of the stars. The psalmist declares with poetic certainty, "He telleth the number of the stars, he calleth them all by their names." Every single star, individually named by God himself. The prophet Isaiah echoes this, crying out, "Lift up your eyes on high, and behold who hath created these stars, that bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names by the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth." This isn't metaphor or exaggeration. These prophets believed, and declared, that God personally designed and named the celestial bodies, and that his power maintains them so perfectly that not a single star fails or goes missing. Even more intriguing, by the time we reach Abraham in Genesis chapter 15, the stars had already been numbered and named. God brings Abraham outside and tells him, "Look now toward heaven, and tell the stars, if thou be able to number them. And he said unto him, So shall thy seed be." The stars served as a visual aid to illustrate God's promise that Abraham's descendants would be innumerable. But notice, the stars were already established symbols by this point. And this, scholars note, shouldn't be confused with the singular seed, Christ, in whom shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. So who created this celestial catalogue? Who had the wisdom, the time, and the divine mandate to chart the heavens in a way that would speak across millennia? Ancient Persian and Arabic traditions point to three names: Adam, Seth, and Enoch. And remarkably, this aligns with what the most respected ancient philosophers and historians discovered when they investigated humanity's origins. Consider Adam's unique position. He was the first and only human created in perfect fellowship with divine intelligence. Unlike everyone born after him, Adam possessed what could be called intuitive divine insight, a direct understanding of the true nature of everything he encountered. He didn't need teachers because his entire being resonated in perfect harmony with God. He was, quite literally, the complete image of God walking the earth. His wisdom exceeded anything that came before or after. Even his own descendants, brilliant as some would become, couldn't match the knowledge Adam possessed. But Adam received more than just innate wisdom. After the fall, God gave him specific revelations about the serpent and the seed of the woman, essentially, the entire gospel message wrapped in prophetic promise. And here's the crucial detail: this knowledge wasn't meant only for Adam or only for his immediate family. He was commissioned to make it known to all the races of creation. Adam was humanity's first evangelist, tasked with transmitting divine truth to everyone. The ancient historian Ballius wrote something remarkable about Adam. He was the first that discovered the motions of the celestial bodies and all other creatures. From his school proceeded whatever good arts and wisdom which were afterward propagated by our Father unto mankind, so that whatever astronomy, geometry and other arts contain in him, he knew the whole thereof. Moreri's tradition states simply, Adam had a perfect knowledge of sciences, and chiefly of what related to the stars, which he taught his children. Now, think about the practical reality of Adam's situation. He and his immediate descendants lived for hundreds of years, centuries to observe, study, experiment, and record. They had time to devise systems for preserving knowledge, methods for transmitting the Creator's plan across generations and cultures. And above them every night stretched a canopy of pristine, unnamed stars just waiting to be organized into meaningful patterns. No natural object could be more perfect for encoding eternal truth than the stars themselves. They couldn't be destroyed, couldn't be altered by human hands, and would remain visible to every culture, every nation, every generation. As long as humanity recognized the divine nature of the Zodiac, the message would remain imperishable. According to the historian Josephus and even more ancient sources, Adam and his son Seth are credited with inventing the alphabet, the very letters that would eventually record scripture. They're also specifically noted as inventors of that peculiar wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies, their appearance and arrangement. Then there's Enoch, the mysterious patriarch who walked with God and never experienced death. The Babylonians attributed the invention of astronomy to Enoch. The Greeks knew him as Atlas, literally, the man who carried the heavens. The Egyptians and Arabian writers identified him with Hermes Trismegistus, the triple great shepherd, through whom stellar wisdom and sciences passed to later generations. These biblical patriarchs, tradition tells us, were the first to draw what we might call celestial hieroglyphics. They named the stars, grouped them into constellations, laid out the zodiac, and essentially transformed the night sky into a picture gallery accessible to the entire world. Their legacy enabled humanity across all cultures and all time periods to look up and read the story of the promised Redeemer, the redemption he would accomplish, and the redeemed he would save. The inspired prophets understood these star signs as symbols of God's divine revelation and promises. This explains why virtually every ancient civilization held the starry emblems in such sacred reverence. It accounts for the universally held doctrine throughout antiquity that the constellations were divine in origin and sacred in character. Even when nations fell into idolatry, when they began worshipping the stars themselves and ascribing to them all sorts of divine and prophetic powers, they still maintained a core belief that these mysterious symbols were manifestations of one supreme, eternal deity. Archaeological evidence supports this narrative in stunning fashion. The Chaldean Genesis tablets, recovered from the ruins of ancient Assyria and Babylon, date to over 2,000 years before Christ, and their substance is nearly identical to the Mosaic account of creation. The fifth tablet specifically describes how God created the star constellations, the signs of the zodiac, which the heathen called mansions, the stations or resting places of the 7 planets, and the planets, moon, and sun. This parallels exactly what Genesis chapter 1 verse 14 states, "Let them be the signs." And it echoes Job's testimony, "By his Spirit he hath garnished the heavens." Without question, the names by which we know the constellations have been handed down from deepest antiquity. The source of inspiration that resulted in their naming and meaning is repeatedly implied, and sometimes directly stated, as coming from God himself. Now, traditional historical astronomy likes to claim that mythology fathered these remarkable delineations of the heavenly bodies. But the evidence tells a different story entirely. The classic fables and myths surrounding the constellations aren't the original tale, they're corruptions and imitations of something far older and far purer. Mythology didn't create the celestial gospel, it distorted it. So let's return to our opening question, what if the night sky isn't random, but rather an ancient book written by God? The evidence suggests this isn't speculation, it's biblical, historical, and archaeological reality. The stars were created as signs, designed to communicate divine truth. Patriarchs like Adam, Seth, and Enoch, living for centuries under divine instruction, charted the heavens and encoded the gospel message in constellations that would outlast any earthly monument. The Bible itself confirms this repeatedly, from Genesis to Job to the Psalms to the prophets. Even ancient civilizations that fell into corruption remembered enough to revere these celestial patterns as sacred and divine in origin. The tragedy is that over millennia, the pure message became obscured. What God intended as his universal storybook, accessible to every tribe, tongue, and nation before a single word of scripture was penned, became overlaid with mythology, superstition, and eventually, the trivialized horoscopes of modern astrology. But the original structure remains. The stars still shine in their appointed courses. And for those willing to look up with eyes informed by scripture and history, the celestial gospel still proclaims its ancient, unchanging message, that God has a plan, that a Redeemer was promised from the very beginning, and that the same God who flung stars into space also numbered every single one and called them each by name. The heavens, as the psalmist wrote, truly do declare the glory of God, and perhaps in more ways than we ever imagined. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. What if the greatest story ever told wasn't written in a book at all, but blazing across the night sky for thousands of years before a single word was ever penned on parchment? What if every civilization that ever gazed upward was reading the same divine manuscript, written in stars and constellations, telling a tale of redemption that would later be echoed in sacred scripture? Tonight, we're embarking on a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Zodiac, the stars, and their mysterious connection to ancient wisdom. This isn't about horoscopes or fortune-telling. This is about something far more profound, a celestial code that may have been hiding in plain sight for millennia, waiting for humanity to recognize its true meaning. Picture yourself as an ancient traveler, navigating by starlight across unfamiliar terrain. Every night, the cosmic dance plays out above, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, the moon follows its predictable arc, and countless stars sweep across the heavens in their nightly procession. But there's one star that defies this universal pattern. One brilliant point of light that never moves, never rises, never sets. The ancients called it Polaris, the North Star. For centuries, this steadfast beacon served as humanity's most reliable compass, simply because while everything else in the heavens seemed to be in constant motion, Polaris remained eerily still. But here's where the story gets fascinating. Polaris isn't actually stationary. It only appears that way because of a cosmic coincidence. It happens to sit almost perfectly aligned with Earth's rotational axis. Around Polaris, something extraordinary occurs. A group of stars moves in a completely different pattern than the rest of the night sky. These circumpolar stars never dip below the horizon. Instead, they trace endless circles around the North Star, passing beneath it from west to east, then arcing overhead from east to west. The farther from Polaris they are, the larger their circular paths become. The ancient astronomers were utterly baffled by this phenomenon. Among these perpetual wanderers were 5 major constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the Great and Little Bears, along with Draco the Dragon, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus. Why should this particular group of stars behave so differently from all the others? Why should they dance eternally around a single point while the sun, moon, and other stars followed their own paths? The answer ancient civilizations arrived at was breathtaking in its audacity. The north must be the center of the universe itself, the throne room from which divine powers governed all creation. The Greeks imagined Zeus's palace among these northern stars. The Chinese placed the throne of Shang-Ti, their supreme deity, precisely at the location of the pole star. And Ursa Major, the ancients believed it was the nerve center of existence, the command post from which all matters of heaven and earth were controlled. But here's where our story takes an even more intriguing turn. That, unchanging, North Star. It hasn't always held that position, and it won't hold it forever. There's a shift happening, so infinitesimally slow that a person couldn't detect it in their lifetime, or even across several generations. But over centuries, the movement becomes undeniable. Earth wobbles. Like a spinning top that's starting to lose momentum, our planet's axis traces a slow, majestic circle through space. This isn't some random wobble, it's caused by the gravitational tug-of-war between the Sun and Moon, both pulling at Earth's equatorial bulge, creating a phenomenon scientists call the procession of the equinoxes. This cosmic waltz takes approximately 25,800 years to complete one full rotation. During that immense span of time, different stars take turns playing the role of the North Star. 5,000 years ago, when the pyramids were being built, the pole star was Thuban, the dragon star. Today, it's Polaris, sitting in the tail of Ursa Minor. In the distant future, the honor will pass to Alderaan in Cepheus, then to Deneb, then to the brilliant Vega, before eventually cycling back to Thuban and starting the whole sequence again. Polaris is actually a relative newcomer to its starring role. Only within the last 2 millennia has it wandered close enough to Earth's axis to be useful for navigation. And here's something remarkable, it still has another 125 years to go before it reaches its closest approach to true north. After that, it will remain humanity's fixed point in the heavens for centuries to come. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the animals in the sky. Where did the names of these constellations come from? Why do we see bears and dragons, lions and virgins in random patterns of stars that don't actually resemble these figures at all? The names have survived from antiquity, passed down through countless generations. Traditional astronomy attributes these designations to mythology, ancient storytellers projecting the gods and heroes onto the canvas of the night sky. But there's another theory, one that's far more intriguing. What if classical mythology didn't create these star stories, but rather corrupted them? What if the myths we know are merely degraded imitations of something older, something original, something divine? This perspective suggests that the 12 signs of the Zodiac aren't arbitrary symbols at all. Instead, they form 12 chapters in a visual book of Revelation, a message that was written in the sky by divine inspiration, a celestial scripture that parallels and complements what would later be written in sacred texts. If this premise holds true, we should expect to find remarkable correspondences between the imagery of the constellations and the narratives found in religious scripture. And indeed, when researchers examine these connections closely, the parallels are striking. The astronomical symbolism and the spiritual messages encoded in holy texts seem to be singing the same song in different languages. Of course, unraveling this celestial code comes with significant challenges. Modern astronomers use Latin names for constellations, names that often obscure their original meanings. Similarly, many biblical references to stars and constellations have been filtered through Greek translations like the Septuagint and Latin versions like the Vulgate, which don't always reflect the original Hebrew designations. Some of the original star pictures appear to have been lost to time, their meanings scattered or distorted through the millennia. But here's the fascinating part, the ancient names of individual stars themselves preserve clues to the original symbolism. By studying these etymologies, researchers believe they can restore the authentic figures and recover their intended meanings. This brings us to a critical question: if the Zodiac is a story, where does that story begin? A circle has no natural starting point, no obvious place to break the loop and say, this is chapter 1. The answer lies in ancient Egypt, in a temple at Esna. On the ceiling of its portico, archaeologists discovered a circular zodiac featuring a figure that doesn't appear in the standard constellation lineup, a sphinx, with the head of a woman and the body of a lion, positioned precisely between the constellations of Virgo and Leo. This placement is revelatory. The word, sphinx, means to bind closely together, and this hybrid creature appears to mark exactly where the two ends of the zodiac join, where the celestial story both begins and ends. Modern astronomy starts the zodiac with Aries the ram, but the ancient system suggests something different: begin with Virgo the virgin, and conclude with Leo the lion. So what story unfolds across these 12 celestial chapters? According to those who study this ancient celestial narrative, it's nothing less than the story of redemption itself. It begins with Virgo, the virgin, symbolizing the promise of a redeemer who would be born as the seed of a woman. The narrative progresses through the subsequent constellations, each adding layers of detail to the tale. The hero of this story suffers wounds, battles serpents, and ultimately returns in triumph to crush the head of the serpent, a clear parallel to biblical prophecy, before establishing a reign characterized by justice and righteousness. The minor constellations that accompany each zodiac sign serve as supporting characters and subplots, providing intricate details that flesh out this grand narrative. Each star grouping contributes a piece to the puzzle, a verse to the cosmic poem being written across the heavens. The story culminates in Leo the Lion, symbolizing kingship, power, and ultimate victory. The Redeemer returned not as a suffering servant but as a conquering ruler. So, we return to our opening question: could the greatest story ever told have been written in the stars before it was written in Scripture? According to this interpretation, the answer is a resounding yes. The message blazing across the night sky and the message penned in sacred texts are two expressions of the same divine truth, written by the same spiritual source. What makes this theory so compelling isn't just the parallels between celestial and scriptural symbolism, it's the universality of the story. Every ancient civilization, regardless of their culture or language, looked up at the same stars. If a divine message was indeed encoded in the heavens, it would have been accessible to all humanity, transcending the barriers of literacy and language that might limit written texts. This celestial story reminds us of something profound. The pictures we see in the constellations are completely arbitrary. Look at the stars themselves, and you'll see nothing that naturally suggests a bear, a lion, or a virgin. These groupings are imposed by human interpretation, or, if the theory holds, by divine intention. The stars are merely the canvas. The meaning comes from somewhere else entirely. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.